Hi guys, I want to say welcome to this month's webinar. So we're going to be talking about the rental reforms. As you can see on your screen now, we're going to have everything about the rental reforms, what's being proposed by Michael Gove, what it means for you. So look, the most important thing is that what we want to talk about. What's happened this week is Michael Gove has unleashed his bill. He said what he wants to do. He wants to shake up the market. He wants to make sure that people are getting exactly what they pay for when it comes to the rental side of things. So we're going to go through each of those in turn. Now, as expected, the moment that any change happens, there's a plethora of negative news surrounding it and how it's going to affect the market. And they say, well, it's going to be the death of the market, the death of the buy-to-let market. But look, let's talk about things. Let's go through everything, and let's discuss a little bit more about what these mean for you, and of course what it means in general for the property market. And so importantly, one thing that we're going to say to everyone is these haven't actually been put in place yet. These are proposals. We've already seen today that there's been tweaks to these proposals, as a lot of people have called in sort of certain loopholes. So for example, one of the proposals was about fixed term contracts. And of course, what does that do? That causes issues with certain student contracts. So they've already gone back to the drawing board and they're going to tweak stuff. And this is going to keep happening. The reality is we probably won't see these come to fruition for a good few years yet. So as I say, in terms of the initial immediate impact, we're probably not going to see too much. So as I say, what we're going to be talking about is as if they were in play today, but we're probably not going to see them in play for a good few years. So in regards to the initial proposal was all to do with the actual Section 21s. Can you kick people out, and can you actually get people out of your property without any no-fault evictions? Well, the answer is no. It's not that straightforward. You can't just simply kick people out for the sake of it. You can't then just ramp up the prices of your rentals. So there's going to be a certain notice period there. Certain things in regards to contracts. Well, you know, when people are out of their tenancies, it's going to be a rolling tenancy. We're talking about quicker procedure promised for fault-based evictions. So that's great for landlords. There's going to be a minimum housing standards as well, which is key. Again, why would you not want that? People have spoke about the negativity surrounding that, and they said that these minimum housing standards are going to cause issues for the buy-to-let market. Well, it's only a good thing, especially if you're a landlord that takes pride in their particular property and takes pride in the way that you keep it. And again, closing certain loopholes as well. So the first thing is that in terms of us and what we can offer you guys is, look, I've worked globally throughout. I've worked in terms of Dubai, South Africa, Spain, Italy, and of course, predominantly in the UK. And we're well placed to look at market trends. Property market history repeats itself. All of the articles that you're seeing now, the negative articles about property market crashes and things like that, that first-time buyers and first-time investors get really nervous about, we've seen. You only have to put do a Google search and search for the last 20 years of property crashes, and you would have seen the same articles simply rehashed in 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, right the way through. And of course, there's going to be instances where they do come to fruition. We know about 2008. Again, we only have to look at what Brexit did. It created a big furor around the property market, saying that it was going to crash, and it didn't. We saw the same in COVID. It was going to crash and it didn't. And we've actually seen the property market tick up slightly last month, according to Rightmove, 1.8%. So again, we're not worried about these short-term trends. It's all about long-term, what happens. And again, we think these proposals by Michael Gove are actually going to play into the hands of our type of client who are looking for better quality projects. So we're multi-award winners, guys, and we want to continue that way. So that's why we do a lot of these educational videos in order to help you guys progress to the next steps. So as we head down, the first thing that we're going to look at is the Section 21 no-fault evictions to be scrapped. They're saying that landlords must provide a specific reason for evicting their tenant and rely on the county courts to decide whether a tenant should be evicted. So there's a lot of people saying, well, we're going to have to take tenants to court. Not at all. The reality is from a landlord's perspective, if you've got a good tenant in there who's paying the bills on time and paying the rent on time, month in, month out, then the reality is you're not going to want to kick that tenant out. The only reason people typically want to get a tenant out is if they want to ramp up that rent pretty dramatically, which we'll come on to in a bit, or if they want to sell their property, or if they want to rent it to one of their friends or family. And you can still do so. You can still remove tenants. You can still evict tenants if you're going to sell that property. If you can prove that you're going to rent it to friends or family, or you're going to have friends or family live there, you can remove tenants. There's no qualms about that. And of course, the reality is that if you've got a tenant in there who's causing disruption, then you'll be able to remove that tenant as well. So we've not got any problems with this particular Section 21 notice to be scrapped. The Section 21 notice was really laborious before, and there were certain things that could and couldn't be done. And again, if you're a good landlord, and we pride ourselves on managing a lot of properties, and we pride ourselves on being good landlords and a good management company, then why would you want to just randomly boot your tenants out? There's nothing worse for someone to be homeless. And at the moment, people can be literally kicked out with a month's notice. And what happens? Well, of course, they've got to find another property. Some people find it hard to go through that vetting process again. So if you're a good landlord and a trusting landlord, then why would you want to do that anyway? So they're not going to scrap evictions totally. Like we said, you can still get people out if it's going to be resold or for your friends and family. Now, let's have a look at this a bit behind the scenes and behind the headlines. Well, the reality is if you can't evict people anymore, well, what kind of properties are going to be falling by the wayside? So where you really do want to have these Section 21s in place is when you've got a certain kind of tenant in who they don't fall foul of the law from an eviction perspective, but you know that they're not treating the property the way that you want it to be treated. So you want them out. So you serve a Section 21 and you can get them out. Well, the reality is that kind of tenant is not the tenant that we're aiming at. They're for cheaper properties. They're for people who typically won't take care of your properties. You can't get a fault-based eviction on them because they haven't gone that far. But the reality is they're not taking care of your property. So you want them out. But we don't aim at that kind of market. We aim at the young professional, a younger demographic, a quality tenant. And the reality is it makes your life easier and it makes our life easier. We earn good money, and we've got no qualms about saying it. As a business, we make good money on our lettings business. And the reality is the less effort that we have to put in, the better it is for us. So in terms of the effort from my team up in Manchester and across the UK, the reality is that we have very minimal contact with tenants because they're all happy, they're all paying on time, and they're taking care of the properties. And that means we have minimum contact with landlords. They just get paid every month and it's straightforward. So actually, we think this is a good thing. It's going to work in our favour because there will be less of the not so good properties available. They will be sold on, and it will put more pressure on the rental market for the kind of properties that we're looking at. And what does more pressure do? It's a simple supply and demand issue. It pushes the prices up for the rentals, which is what you want to hear as a landlord. We then move on to a few little other changes that they were going to make. Introduction of rolling tenancies. So what does this mean? Well, at the end of the term, typically you renegotiate the tenancy, and you can renegotiate, you can put it up, or sometimes that the tenant can just simply leave. Well, it's great to have rolling tenancies because you know that you've got a tenant in there that is happy to just keep paying and keep rolling and keep paying a monthly fee. But also when we renegotiate as a lettings company, again, I'm happy to be transparent on this, to get someone else, to get the same tenant to stay, to sign is very straightforward for us, but we make money on it. We can make money by charging the landlord a fee for going through the rigmarole of re-signing, potentially re-vetting, and that's how another fee for us. So it would actually scrap that. So what it would actually do is it will actually save landlords money if they can keep the same person in there on a rolling tenancy. There's no renewal fee from a letting agent like us. So although a letting agent will lose out, as landlords, you'll potentially gain from this. So again, the introduction of rolling tenancies isn't going to impact you at all. Then we come on to the second item here, that you can see the rent increase notice period. Well, at the moment, it's a month. They're going to increase it to 2 months. But again, if you've got an organised letting agent, such as ourselves, and we always advise people, use a letting agent for the price of what is typically a cup of coffee a day. It will take all the stresses and the strains away from any type of let. So the reality is that you've got a rent increase notice period from 1 month to 2. Well, get organised. So what we say to people is, look, we tell people 6 months in advance, what are you looking to do? And if they're looking to keep the rent the same, we let the tenant know. If you're looking to increase, the tenant's got 6 months to decide whether they want to take that property on, keep it on, or move. And then 2 to 3 months from actually re-signing or not re-signing, we know whether we need to advertise that or not. So this is straightforward. This is not going to impact anyone whatsoever. And then you've got a procedure promised for fault-based evictions. Now, this is a bit vague. Let's be realistic. They're promising a procedure, but not going into great detail what the procedure is. This is a typical government policy that they'll tell you something's going to happen, but don't tell you how they're going to do it. So there's going to be a procedure for fault-based evictions. But what they're going to try and work out is they're going to try and work out how to simplify it so people don't have to go through the courts, because the last thing that they want is to, clog up county courts with a load of minor evictions. So there's going to be hopefully a better procedure in terms of how to evict people if there is a fault-based eviction. But it goes back to what we say: don't buy cheap. Don't buy something where you're going to get a typical tenant in that doesn't treat the place the way that you would treat your own home. If you get a quality accommodation, and if you get something, especially if it's off plan and new, and you know that someone's going to go in and they're going to want to live there, a younger demographic, they're going to treat it well. The reality is you're not even going to have to worry about this. A fault-based eviction isn't going to be on your radar. It's as simple as that. So then we start to come down to some more bits of nitty-gritty. Well, first of all, you're not going to be able to unreasonably refuse tenants having pets. But again, if you've got a certain type of tenant in there, if you're aiming at a family in a certain type of property, they're more likely going to have a number of pets. There was actually one tenant, I've heard stories where they had, literally, it was like an exotic petting zoo in the place. The reality is that's the last thing that you want. But in the reality, if you've got a younger demographic, they may have a small dog or a small cat, but they're going to take care of your place. They're going to take care of your particular property. And that's all you ask for. So they're not going to be able to unreasonably refuse. Now, it's the same as what the majority of apartments are now. If there are things on there which is, if you've got a huge dog that's going into your apartment and making a lot of noise, then there's going to be a right to basically say that you can't have pets in your particular property. But the reality is that my advice to people is it's actually good to open up to pets. You get a nice demographic in there, as long as you've got that good quality property, and of course that younger working demographic. And there's going to be a landlord portal. This again will play into your favour, because if you've got a landlord portal where tenants can rate them, and it will either be you're rated as an individual landlord or you're rated as a company like us. Well, if you've got a good 5-star rating, then it means that the likelihood is your property is going to simply rent out even quicker. Because what's going to happen is when a tenant goes, it's a bit like, when you go on to do a hotel on booking.com or Airbnb, what do you look for? You look at ratings. It's going to be the same thing. If you've got a 3-star rating where someone can go in and say, well, my landlord was terrible, never did this, never did that, never fixed the boiler, you're not going to rent from them. Whereas if you've got a 5-star rating that says great communication, always fix the problems, or on time every time, you're going to be able to demand higher rent, and you're going to be able to get a better occupancy rate. And as a landlord, that's all you're asking for: good occupancy rates and high rents. Then, of course, we start to move on to the property ombudsman. There's a property ombudsman currently at the moment, but they're going to reintroduce, or they're going to extend the original property ombudsman to resolve landlord and tenant disputes. Now, my experience with the current property ombudsman is, like any kind of ombudsman, they're a little bit stodgy. They're not run like typically a private company would be. They're run like a government and civil service would be, and they're a little bit stodgy. But again, you can already see that this already applies to landlords with letting agents, but it's going to be extended to private landlords as well. So we're members of the property ombudsman. So we have to be members of a property ombudsman to be able to sell property, to be able to let, and we're also members of ALA as well. But this is going to be extended to private landlords as well. So what you've got to ask yourself is, what does this do? All of these things that we've gone through today, what's it do? Well, it makes it a lot more professional. We actually wrote in 2016 in the parliamentary review, we got asked to write in the yearly parliamentary review, what would we do with the property market? Well, we would make it a little bit more regulated. not to the extent where we got some FCA type regulatory sitting above it, but some form of regulation which can make it a lot stricter. So you do get quality accommodation to be rented. You don't get something which has got damp, where you've got people living in it and you've got families and young kids living in a place where there's no boiler, where it's damp and it's cold. So the reality is this is going to play into certain people's hands. But what will it do? It will eliminate all of the landlords, and it will eliminate all the properties that are below par, that are below standard. So what that means is all the people that are in those properties will need to find somewhere to live, because they won't be able to be renting that particular property. So as they move up the ladder, what essentially will happen is they will then put higher demand on the next rung of the ladder up. And then the next rung of the ladder moves up. And as that happens, and what I mean by the ladder, I mean the rental ladder, as people move up the rental ladder, eventually there's going to be the pressure point, and it's going to put more pressure on rental properties. We've already seen that the supply is down on rental properties simply due to construction was down over the last few years. Also, as developers and contractors realise that there's not the same amount of profit in developments as there was a few years back, simply because of the increase in price of materials. Well, the reality is they've slowed down build. So suddenly we've got this pressure cooker of rentals, and that's only going to be exasperated by what you've seen. But the reality is if you've got a quality property, and if you're buying quality property and you're a quality landlord, and you're a landlord that can actually, put the head above the parapet and say, look, we're happy to do whatever the tenant asks within reason in terms of keeping it tidy. Every year you're going to do a little bit of a refurb, you're going to decorate slightly. Then the reality is you're going to have no problem with this whatsoever. This is only going to affect those rogue landlords, or the landlords that aren't doing things in the right manner. So what we're actually saying to people is we think it's going to push rental prices up, which actually is great for our landlords and fantastic for those who are doing things in the right manner. So look, what I want to do, guys, is now head over to you, and we're going to talk about things like the rent arrears, because this is going to be a mandatory ground for eviction. But like we said, if you don't have issues, if you haven't got tenants who are poor tenants, and if you've got good poor quality, I should say, tenants, and if you've got good quality tenants, you're not going to have rent arrears. We've only ever had one issue with rent arrears, and the tenant left and the deposit was kept, so the client wasn't actually out of pocket. But again, as I say, this is for the quality accommodation. For those of you guys, and most people who deal with us have got quality accommodation, the reality is it's not going to affect you in a negative way whatsoever. And as I say, like we've covered already, is the minimum housing standard, which is key. And that's why we tell people, buy new. Don't buy rundown properties where you're going to struggle to rent. Don't buy things with an E rating on an EPC that you can't get up to that magical C rating. So you're going to have problems down the years. But as I say, we think this is going to drive prices up, but it's not going to be for a few years yet. So in terms of people panicking what they need to do at the moment, nothing, but it's just one to keep your eye on in the future. That's why we're really marketing the off-plan properties. And again, because you've got things here like the no ban on the benefits or the families, in the nicest possible way, there might not be the certain type of clientele that you're aiming at if you want to have a certain type of clientele in your property. So then simple, don't buy those type of properties. Buy the things that are closer to the city centre. Yes, you might have to spend a little bit more money on the property, but the quality in that property, that then feeds down to the type of tenants that you get in. So guys, at the bottom of your screen, you should see somewhere where you've got a speech bubble or questions. Feel free to sort of type away, ask any questions that you've got. In terms of us, these are our details here. You can contact us at info@flambardwilliams.co.uk, or you've got our number here. And I'll start answering the questions that you've provided. So let's dive in. Let's have a look. So after the marketing sent out by Shanice, can you advise what the latest is with Flambard Williams Prestige? Yeah, I can. So Flambard Williams Prestige is an arm of our business, which is typically for clients who want either something that's a bit higher in price, high net worth clients, or you've got things where they want distressed developer. And of course, that distressed developer may have a number of projects that they want to sell, but they want to sell them in bulk. So we had something recently where it's a 3.4, 3.5 million pound project, but they were willing to let it go for 1.8, 1.9. That's what Flambard Williams Prestige is around. And of course, what that is, that's all to do with, there's an additional service that goes with that. Anyone that comes on, they get part of the concierge service as well. But yeah, you can do that. It's fwprestige.com. What happens if you don't have a break clause and you have tenants that you want to evict? Good question. So you again, if it's just a random, well, you're after 5 or 4 months, you can't do it. They've got to be in there for at least 6 months. That's the plan anyway. Again, these are going to be slightly tweaked. And the reality is that you can't just suddenly randomly evict someone. So there's got to be at least 6 months. But after that period, if you don't have a break clause, then you can only evict for certain reasons. One is if you're going to sell that property, and two, if you're going to rent it to, or you're going to live in it, or you've got friends and family that want to live in that property. But it might be good that you come back on that, and just as I answer the other questions, if you let me know what reason could you want to evict, that apart from those reasons that I've just given, why would you want to just randomly evict someone from your particular property? If they're not doing anything wrong, but it'd be good to hear from you on that. What are currently your lowest rise developments in terms of floors and flats available in the block? Good question. And the lowest rise that we've got is, I think it's a 3-story development. That will probably be the lowest 3-story development, 3 or 4 stories. Yeah, 3 stories. And that will be in Preston, I believe. And then we've got things that go up to 20, 25 floors in either London, even higher in London. And of course, Manchester, we've got some skyscrapers in Manchester as well. So yeah, but the lowest I would say is 3 floors. How do you compare buying an apartment against similar size houses? And there's a question straight after that's very similar. It says, what's the difference from the Michael Gove regulations in terms of apartments versus houses? Well, there isn't in terms of the regulations. That's the first thing. So regardless of the regulations, they're going to apply to both apartments and houses. But the reason why we talk about apartments over houses is because we just feel that city centre demographic is a younger demographic. They have more disposable income. They don't have, they're not married yet. They don't have children to pay for. A lot of people in the city centre, they might not have a car, so they haven't got outlay on a car. So their only really big outlay is their rent. And of course, wages have been increasing, hence a number of things to do with inflation, but it's another story. But they have more disposable income. So that's why we say your city centre apartments is probably going to get you a better kind of tenant, and with no arrears, higher occupancy rates. And of course, it's where the younger demographic want to be. But in terms of the actual regulations, it's going to be one size fits all for whether it's apartments or houses. Can you explain the difference between buying a new property or an older building requiring refurbishment? Where do you get a better return? Forget about new properties, forget about requiring refurbishment. Your return simply comes from the price that you purchased that property for against the rental price. It's that simple. If you buy, you might get a refurbishment that you've bought dirt cheap. You can do a mini refurbishment on it and you've got high rent. Well, that's going to make you better than buying an apartment, or vice versa. You might buy a market value refurbishment. It's cost you a fortune to develop because you've not thought about the damp and there's a basement in there, and you get rent. And again, that lowers your yield. It's not about having a new property versus a refurbishment per se. It's just about the price that you paid for something. Some people have said to me, well, what's the difference between one apartment building and another? The reality is, it's just what you paid for it. There might be 2 apartment buildings next to each other. As long as they're of similar quality, if you've got one that's 150,000 for a 1-bed and one that's 190 for a 1-bed, reality is the 150,000 is going to give you a better rate of return income wise, percentage wise, because you're going to be renting them for a similar amount. However, on the norm, what I would say is at the moment, a new property is going to give you, an off-plan new property is going to give you a better return than a refurbishment. Why? All to do with the economies of scale when you're actually redeveloping this. Materials are expensive at the moment. So a one-off person doing a refurbishment is going to be tougher than a company out there who can then go and do a new build. That's the first thing that I would say. So I would always go with somewhere where where you can buy, where there's a lot of apartments being done at the same time, rather than you trying to do it yourself. But if you're saying about a new property, an off-plan versus a company doing, refurbishing 30, 40 flats or 50 flats, however many it may be, then again, in terms of the process, it's a pretty similar process. There's probably a little bit more security in going with something that's being refurbished as a bulk refurbishment, because the developer has had to spend a good lot of information on that property rather than just a patch of grass. So you probably have more risk if you're doing something totally off plan. But again, in terms of the advantages of the new off-plan properties, they're probably going to be better insulated, better EPC rating, better technology, all the latest sort of like mod cons in terms of the Hikvision CCTV. You can be patched in. Someone rings on your doorbell, you can view who they are. So the new property will probably just have better tech, basically. How do you feel the next best city? Where do you feel the next best city is to invest, currently getting the best yields and suitable tenants? Again, typically that's pretty much been done in terms of, whereas back in 2014-15, the next best city would have been Liverpool and Manchester, and then it evolved Preston and so on. I would say most cities have been done and dusted in terms of that they've had the majority of their growth. There's still growth to be had, but they've had the majority. So I would look at pockets within those cities, and then that comes down to affordability. So what you've got to do is you've got to work out, well, actually, can you afford Manchester? No, we'll move to Liverpool. No, we'll go to Preston. So this all great cities, but they will have different price points. And then look at pockets in those areas. So if you're going to go for Manchester, you might look at the Trafford area, which is going through regeneration. If you're going to look at Liverpool, you might go to the Liverpool Water Scheme that's going through regeneration. So it's all about trying to find pockets within those cities, rather than saying as a whole, that city is the next best one to go through. Can you give an overview on how the one-bed apartments are comparing to the two-bed flats in regards to purchase prices and lettings? Again, totally depends on area, but a good question, because we typically have a lot of people say, what's better to buy? Well, it varies on area. So there's a project that we had where the disparity between a one-bed and a two-bed was about 70,000. That's a no-brainer. Don't pay it. Go for a one-bed. You're not going to have 70,000 percentage-wise increase in terms of your rent. You're not, one beds were going for, let's say, 140,000, and you've got to pay 50% more for your two bed. You're not going to get 50% more rent for that two bed. So my advice is simply don't go for a two bed. However, where we've had a really close, price range between one and two beds, maybe 20, 25,000, then it's definitely worth looking at that two bed, because the reality is you might have something that is going to be, £25,000 more to actually buy, but you might get actually sort of 20, 30% extra in rent. And of course, the growth might be there as well. So there's some fantastic options, but again, it's all about speaking to a broker and finding out about you, your budget. And we'll be honest with you, we're not going to try and sell you the more expensive property because we get more commission, which we do, by the way. That's how we work. But it's all about finding out what gives you the best return. If we get you the best return, you'll come back to us and you'll do multiple deals with us time and time again. Next question, is your main focus remaining in Sheffield, Manchester and Liverpool, plus your links with London, any other areas you're looking at the UK? Yeah, again, I would look at predominantly city centres. I typically wouldn't go for too many secondary cities, and not there's anything wrong with these cities, but things like Hull or Derby and those kind of things, great cities, not criticising those at all, but they don't have the same wow factor as the places like the Manchesters, Liverpool, Leeds, Sheffields, Nottinghams, Preston as well, London. And also we've got to think about transport links. People, we want things that are easy to get to, so you can switch from a short-term let to a long-term let. That's what you really want to be doing, guys. You don't want to be doing things where you've got something cheap in the in a secondary or a certain kind of city. You can't rent it out. You've got big occupancy rates. So what do? You cheapen your rent. You get cheaper rent. You get a certain type of tenant in there. Doesn't take care of your property, and then it goes back to the Michael Gove reforms that we're talking about. And you suddenly don't get, or you can't evict them easily. So that's why you don't want to go for those cities. I would pay, you pay for what you get. So if you've got 150,000 and that's what you're putting aside, don't go and buy 2 properties for 70. I would go and buy 150,000 on a property, get a good quality property, good quality tenant, and get someone to let it out for you. And I think that's it, guys. We've actually had a question here. Following your sponsorship of Wilco, how's this been perceived? Do you plan to expand your profile within the professional sport? Yeah, so look, we started sponsoring Wilco probably back in November. I met him in Gleneagles in September, I think it was. And honestly, you can't ask for a nicer guy. I remember, we had part of our 4-ball, the people hitting in a rough, and he's helping people find their balls. And it's typically not what I normally experience on these kind of events. He's just a lovely gent. So we got chatting, yeah, we just wanted to, be a part of his journey, because we think he's going to be, well, he's phenomenal already, but we think it's only a matter of time before he cracks it and wins a major. And I think that once he's got the first one, I think that it will just be a continuing success. And it's been perceived really well. So we've got a lot of clients now who want to be a part of that. And, they're desperate to play golf with him on the events that we do. So we've only got a select number of places. So I think that's great as well. And are we going to expand the profile in the professional sport? I don't know. That's, I'll leave that to the marketing department. But in terms of so far, no, it's been fantastic. And we're really proud of what he's achieved. And he's just, last week he played in Surrey and he got through to the US Open. So we're really excited to watch that. We're actually ordered some big screens in here so we can actually have it up while everyone's working. Not that they'll get much work done while that's on, but we've done that. We've got a competition as well, which is going to be at the Greenwich Peninsula driving range here. So that's going to be where long drive competition. We're going to, have going to be a great night. We're going to have some drinks, some food, a bit of networking, long drive competition. And we're going to take 2 winners up to Gleneagles to play with Wilco as well. So yeah, it's going to be great. So it's been perceived really well. Thanks for the question. And in terms of the future expanding with other professional sports stars, look, we think we've got the best one for the future, if I'm honest with you. And as I say, such a nice lad as well, and absolute pleasure. And his family, I said to him, his family would have been extremely proud the way he conducts himself. He's only young. I remember I certainly wasn't like that at 22, 23. So yeah, hats off to him and really excited for his future. And we've got one more here as well. In terms of Manchester versus Liverpool, what would you go for? Again, guys, it depends on your budget and it depends on what you're looking for. I would typically say either. Genuinely, either of those cities could work for you. They both offer great growth. They both offer great income. I don't think you can have any qualms with either of those cities. But the best thing is, as I say, speak to a professional broker, speak to someone, and don't just use our company. Speak to other companies as well. Get a feel of the market. You will have some companies out there that are just Liverpool-centric or Manchester-centric. Speak to someone who deals with all the cities that can educate you. Don't just take their word for it. Do your own research on that. That will give you the confidence that you're dealing with the right company. So guys, just to recap, these rental reforms that are taking place, as I say, they're not going to be implemented anytime soon. They're going to take time to tweak, to perfect. Probably not looking for a good couple of years yet before they're actually in place. But how do I think they're going to impact things? I think they're actually going to have the opposite effect to what they're going to probably try and achieve. I think they're going to drive up rents. They're going to drive a certain type of person away from the buy-to-let market, and that's for the cheaper, lower rental properties. They're going to drive people into the higher class properties, the better quality properties, and of course, it's going to push up the rents. So as I say, buy quality, guys, and you're going to get a quality tenant. It's as simple as that. Well, look, it's been a pleasure. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week and a good month. And yeah, let's hope we get some better weather over here. But have a lovely bank holiday, everyone, next week. And I look forward to speaking to everyone soon.